Good day, everyone. I'm Miss Novelyn Tyson, and I am excited to welcome you to this session on effective pressure ulcer prevention. I am currently working as a nurse educator, and I was given the task to deliver this important lecture to support your transition into clinical practice. As newly hired nurses, you are now part of the front lines of the patient care. One of our key responsibilities is protecting our patients from harm, and a preventable yet common condition that we face is the pressure ulcer, or what we often call bed sores. Today, we'll learn how to spot risks early, prevent them through smart strategies, and ensure every patient stays comfortable, mobile, and well cared for. To support your learning needs, this session will follow a lecture discussion format enhanced with PowerPoint and visual aids to clearly present the essential concepts. We'll also watch a short video demonstration followed by a return demonstration to help you apply what you have learned in practice. Your understanding will be evaluated through a pre-test and post-test, and we'll wrap it with an interactive Q&A session so you can ask questions, clarify your concerns, and actively participate in the discussion. I look forward to learning with you today and helping you build the confidence and skills needed to prevent pressure ulcers in your nursing practice. Before we dive into the core content, let me walk you through what we aim to achieve in this short yet meaningful session. Our general objective is to equip you, our newly hired nurses, with the knowledge and the essential skills to prevent pressure ulcers and maintain skin integrity across patient care situations. This isn't about just theory. It's about empowering you to confidently apply these practices at the bedside. To guide us, I have outlined a few specific objectives. By the end of this session, you should be able to identify key risk factors that contribute to the development of pressure ulcer, explain best practices for maintaining skin integrity and preventing pressure ulcer development, demonstrate how to properly use pressure relieving devices and proper positioning techniques, assess patient risk for pressure ulcer development by using Braden Scale assessment, and evaluate your knowledge through a pre- and post-test. These objectives are the backbone of our learning today, and I promise we'll make them practical, engaging, and relevant to your everyday nursing care. Before we move forward, let's take a moment to watch a short video that illustrates how pressure ulcers develop. This video will help you visualize the underlying causes, including prolonged pressure, friction, and shear, and understand the stages of tissue damage that can occur if preventive measures are not taken. The risk factors include limited mobility and immobility. This includes patients who are bedridden or patients who are critically ill and are admitted in ICU. Impaired sensory perception, patients who has diabetes mellitus and spinal cord injuries. Poor nutrition and hydration, moisture incontinence. Also, friction and shear, advanced age, poor circulation and medical conditions such as your cardiovascular diseases, cognitive impairments such as dementia, and history of pressure ulcers. Now that we have identified who is most at risk, let's talk about where pressure ulcers are most likely to develop. Certain parts of the body, especially over bony prominences, example of which is coccyx, sacrum, greater trochanter, inner knees, elbows, heels, hip, back, shoulder, and buttocks. After knowing the locations, it's also important to understand how pressure ulcer progress over time. Early signs can be subtle, but if left unaddressed, they can quickly worsen and lead to serious complications. Pressure ulcers are classified into stages, each reflecting a deeper level of tissue damage. As nurses, we must be able to recognize and accurately stage pressure ulcers to guide appropriate interventions and promote healing. Let's now walk through the 4 main stages along with the additional categories. Stage 1, non-blanchable erythema. The color may differ from the surrounding area for darkly pigmented skin, and it may be painful, firm, soft, warmer or cooler compared to the adjacent tissue. The epidermis or the upper layer of the skin is affected. A non-blanchable erythema is the area of redness that does not disappear under applied pressure. The next stage is Stage 2, partial thickness loss of the dermis. A shallow open ulcer with a red-pink wound bed without slough, or it is in a form of blister can be an intact, open or ruptured. It can be serum-filled or serous sanguinous also. It should not be used to describe skin tears, tape burns, incontinence-associated dermatitis, maceration, or excoriation. Now, let's go to the other stage, which is Stage 3. Stage 3 is full-thickness tissue loss, wherein subcutaneous fat may be visible, but the bone, tendon, and the muscles are not exposed. A slough may be present, but does not obscure the depth of the tissue loss, and the depth may vary by anatomical location. The last stage is Stage 4. Stage 4 is the full-thickness tissue loss. The bone, tendon, or muscle is exposed. It is visible and directly palpable. A slough or eschar may be present also, and includes undermining and tunneling. Infection can likely occur. We have additional categories as well: the unstageable pressure ulcer injury, deep tissue pressure injury, the medical device-related pressure injury, and the mucosal membrane pressure injury. Unstageable pressure injury involves full-thickness skin tissue loss, but the actual depth is unknown. Unless a debridement can be done, then you can categorize it as a Stage 3 or Stage 4 pressure ulcer. Deep tissue pressure injury is a purple or maroon localized area of discolored skin. It is a blood-filled blister. It is painful, firm, mushy, buggy, warmer or cooler also compared to the adjacent tissues. While the medical or device-related pressure injury and mucosal membrane pressure injury results from the use of the medical devices such as oxygen tubing. The scale assesses 6 key areas, each contributing to skin breakdown: sensory perception, moisture, activity, mobility, nutrition, friction, and shear. Sensory perception is the ability to respond meaningfully to pressure-related discomfort. A patient who is unconscious or has reduced sensation is at higher risk. Moisture, it is how often the skin is exposed to moisture. Skin that's frequently damp from sweat, urine, or wound drainage is more prone to breakdown. Activity, it refers to the patient's level of physical activity. Someone who is bedbound or chair-bound will score lower and be at greater risk. Mobility, it is the ability to change and control body position. Limited mobility leads to prolonged pressure in certain areas. Nutrition reflects the patient's usual food intake. Poor nutrition slows healing and increases vulnerability to skin damage. And friction and shear, it is related to the movement that can cause skin tear or slide, such as when a patient slides down in bed. Each category is scored from 1 to 4 except for friction and shear, which is scored from 1 to 3. The total score ranges from 6 to 23, with lower scores indicating higher risk. A score of 9 or below is considered very high risk, 10 to 12 as high risk, 13 to 14 moderate risk, 15 to 18 mild risk, and 19 to 23 as no risk. As nurses, it's important to assess each patient on admission and then reassess regularly, especially when their condition changes. This tool helps us to take action early, tailoring interventions like repositioning, skin protection, and nutritional support. High-risk and very high-risk patients are reassessed every shift at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., and 11 p.m., while no-risk, mild risk, and moderate risk patients are reassessed 24 hours daily at 7 a.m. Let's now look at a sample case and try scoring it together. Here's our patient. Mr. Santos is a 76-year-old male admitted with pneumonia. He is alert but weak and remains mostly confined to bed. His skin is often damp from sweating and occasional incontinence. He needs assistance to reposition in bed, and he only eats about half of his meals. Staff also noted that he tends to slide down in bed when propped up. Now, let's assess Mr. Santos using the Braden scale. I'll guide you through each category, and together, we'll estimate his scores based on the information provided. Sensory perception, Mr. Santos is alert and responds appropriately. We can give him a score of 3. Moisture, his skin is frequently damp. That suggests a score of 2. Activity, he's bed-bound, which means a score of 1. Mobility, he needs to help to move in bed. Let's assign a score of 2. Nutrition, eating only half of his meals puts him at a score of 2. Friction and shear, he tends to slide down, so we can give him a score of 2. Now, let's add those up. 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 and plus 2 is equal to 12. With a Braden score of 12, Mr. Santos is at high risk for developing pressure ulcers. Now, for your activity, think about this. What interventions would you prioritize to help lower Mr. Santos' risk? I'd like you to take 2 minutes to discuss this with the person next to you. Then, we'll come back together and share a few key ideas as a group. All right, let's bring it back together. Let's hear some of your ideas. What interventions would you prioritize for Mr. Santos based on his high-risk score? Great suggestion. Thank you for sharing. And don't forget about patient education and family involvement. Letting them know about the importance of repositioning and nutrition can make a big difference in long-term prevention. This type of risk-based planning is exactly what the Braden scale helps us do. Identify risk early and tailor interventions to each patient's specific needs. Now that we've discussed how to assess a patient's risk using the Braden scale, the next important step is turning that assessment into action. Assessment alone isn't enough. What truly makes a difference is the set of preventive strategies we implement based on that risk. To help guide your clinical practice, we'll use a simple acronym, INJURY. Each letter in INJURY represents a core preventive strategy that addresses one or more risk factors for pressure ulcers. Let's break down what each letter stands for and explore how these strategies can be integrated into our daily care routines. I, inspect skin regularly. Check your patient's skin daily, especially over bony areas. Early detection means early intervention. And Nourish with proper hydration and nutrition. A well-nourished body heals better. Make sure your patient gets enough fluids, protein, and essential nutrients. J. Just reposition. Turn and reposition your patients at least every 2 hours to relieve pressure and improve circulation. U. Use support surfaces. Use special mattresses, cushions, or heel protectors to reduce pressure on vulnerable areas. R. Reduce and manage incontinence. Moisture from urine or stool breaks down skin. Keep skin clean and dry using barrier creams and proper hygiene. Why? Your team matters. Educate and involve everyone. Prevention is a team effort. Involve caregivers, fellow staff, and patients in maintaining skin integrity. We've discussed the significance of repositioning in preventing pressure ulcers. Now, let's watch a short video that demonstrates the 30-degree tilt technique. Pay close attention to the patient's repositioning and the use of support devices to ensure effective pressure redistribution. We've now covered the essential preventive strategies using the injury framework. Practical steps that help reduce risk and promote patient safety. But aside from being a clinical responsibility, pressure ulcer prevention is also a legal and ethical obligation. Pressure ulcers are often classified as never events, incidents that are legally preventable and should not occur in a well-managed healthcare setting. When they do happen, they can lead not only to patient harm but also to serious legal consequences for healthcare providers and institutions. So next, let's take a closer look at the legal implications of pressure ulcer development and understand how documentation, adherence to protocols, and early intervention play a role in protecting both the patient and the nurse. Legal considerations include standard of care and duty of care, where we are legally obligated to adhere to established clinical guidelines for preventing and managing pressure ulcers. Accurate and timely documentation is essential also as it protects us against legal liabilities. Patients' rights and informed consent. Patients has the right to be informed about the risk and the prevention strategies being implemented to them. They must be involved also in decision-making. It can also lead to negligence and malpractice if a preventable pressure ulcer happens due to lack of proper reassessment, repositioning, or treatment, and the pressure ulcer is developed in the institution. We have also to adhere to national patient safety goals and accreditation standards such as JCI, CBAHI, and the Ministry of Health. While legal responsibilities define what we are required to do, ethical considerations guide us in doing what is right, even beyond what policies and laws demand. Preventing pressure ulcers isn't just about avoiding penalties or following checklists. It's about preserving dignity, alleviating suffering, and advocating for our patients' well-being, especially when they can't speak for themselves. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on the ethical dimensions of our role as nurses in pressure ulcer prevention, how our values, compassion, and professional judgment all come together in the care we provide. Ethical considerations include beneficence or doing good. It is our duty to prevent harm by implementing best practices for pressure ulcer prevention. Doing no harm or non-maleficence, we must ensure that care practices do not contribute to pressure ulcer development. Autonomy and patient-centered care. The patient has the right to refuse care, but we have to educate them with the potential risks and respect their rights and ensure their well-being. Justice and equity in care must be applied to all patients across all populations, regardless of their status or health condition. And we must advocate for our patients by ensuring that they receive appropriate pressure ulcer prevention measures. As we wrap up today's session on pressure ulcer prevention, I hope you now have a clearer understanding of how we, as nurses, play a vital role in protecting our patients from this preventable condition. From using tools like the Braden scale, to applying practical strategies through the injury acronym, to understanding the legal and ethical implications, we've covered the complete picture of how prevention must be intentional, consistent, and collaborative. Earlier, you completed a pretest to help gauge your initial knowledge. After this session, you'll now take a post-test, which will help measure how much you've gained and identify any areas that might need further clarification. We will also conduct a return demonstration where you'll apply what you've learned, especially on proper positioning and skin inspection techniques. This is your opportunity to put theory into practice and receive feedback to strengthen your skills. Remember, preventing pressure ulcers is not just a task. It's a reflection of our commitment to providing safe, ethical, and high-quality nursing care. Thank you for all your active participation today, and I look forward to seeing how you'll bring this knowledge into your clinical practice.